Well, I am here in lieu of Mr. Pawel Skutecki, who is member of parliament, and the session of the parliament has been extended to Friday, and they are voting today, so he had to be there, of course. A few words about Poland and the regulation of e-cigarettes. At first, some history. E-cigarettes were introduced in Poland in 2007, 2008, but at that time it was only a private import by a handful of vapers. They were just buying it mainly from China. What's interesting, also in 2008, the first Internet Vapers Forum was created, and it still exists today. Of course, it has 30 or 40,000 of members. In 2009, first Polish companies emerged, some of them importing goods from China, some of them doing things here in Poland, I mean making liquids. But the real boom was in 2010. The number of distributors and sellers has grown exponentially. Then the growth was not so fast, but still new companies emerged. At that time, there were two types of companies. There were a handful of big ones and hundreds, if not over 1,000 of small ones. Those small ones usually sold equipment and liquids online. So that was usually only the owner and maybe some person to help to post it. At that time, there was no special law regarding e-cigarettes, so we had here something, a kind of Wild West. Very, very nice place. And what's interesting, the market was at that time self-regulating. For example, nicotine-containing products were not sold to minors. There was no such a law, but the market self-regulated that. The number of vapers was growing steadily, and it reached 1.5 to 2, roughly, million right now, but still 7 or even 8 million, we can estimate, people are smoking regular cigarettes. At that time, we've seen dark clouds and a storm coming, and unfortunately, those clouds had no silver lining. In 2012, European Commission adopted proposal to revise Tobacco Products Directive. Europeans know that situation. Several Polish vapers, it was over 200 of us, took part in formal consultations. Most of us, of course, were absolutely against including e-cigarettes into Tobacco Directive. I still think that e-cigs should not be classified as a tobacco product. We could extract nicotine from potatoes, cauliflowers, no problem. But as we know, the new law was approved by European Parliament in 2014. The directive entered into force in May 2014 and became applicable in the EU member states on the 20th of May 2016. Then, in Poland, there was the next step, implementation of this directive. At this stage, we started to fight. There were thousands of formal petitions sent to the Prime Minister. Several activists took part in public hearings in the Polish Parliament. We also have sent hundreds of emails to the members of Parliament explaining our point of view and supporting it with the result of scientific research. And similar emails were also sent to the Ministry of Health. At that time, in 2016, I even met with the Deputy Minister of Health. We talked for an hour, but the result was none. Our position was quite clear. Okay, we know we have to implement the TPD, but we should do it wisely without additional restrictions. Alas, the authorities decided otherwise. In July 2016, the new law has been adopted with several additional restrictions, quite tough. The worst one was and is, right now, the total ban of online sales and the ban of cross-border sales. The Bureau of Chemical Substances, or namely the Inspector of Chemical Substances, is supervising the implementation of the Act. And they also collect all the information provided by distributors and manufacturers. But what is very sad from my point of view as a chemist and as a vapor, of course, the inspector does not conduct any tests on liquids. They only collect files. Do they care about vapor safety? No. Do they think about testing? No. So what are the results right now? It's almost 2 years since the law became effective in Poland, and the landscape has changed dramatically. Hundreds of the small companies, most, if not all, of the small companies were just wiped out from the market. Right now we have only a handful of bigger companies, less than 10, and the biggest one, the CIG Group, has already been sold, and since 2015 it's a part of British American Tobacco. As I said, Polish vapor cannot buy e-cigarettes and liquids online, which is just a paradox, because you can buy regular cigarettes almost everywhere. People from small towns, villages, they have to travel 20, or sometimes I have a friend that has to travel 50 kilometers to buy a coil for the e-cig or a bottle of liquid. Of course, those small bottles, 10 milliliters, because that's required by TPD. So we have something which I call a deadly paradox. The access to a healthier product is heavily restricted, whereas the access to regular cigarettes is exactly the same as it was before the implementation and before the TPD. What's more, well, that was just similar to that, what Colin said. Advertising of e-cigs is forbidden, and that includes information, scientific information. They treat it as an advertising. We cannot compare it to regular cigarettes. So we must not inform people about the differences between cigarettes and regular ones. And also an unofficial obstacles. I will tell you about one such obstacle. 3 years ago, a friend of mine, he's an administrator of the e-cig forum, started to register Polish Vapers Association. It was 3 years ago. Still, we do not have this association registered. 3 sessions of the court, because the court has to approve the statute of the organization, 3 sessions of the court rejected that statute. And the information for us is quite obscure. When will it be registered? We don't know. We hoped, even last year we hoped we can join the INCO. This year we cannot join the INCO too. Maybe next year, hopefully. Thank you.